9 tropical storms devastated the United States in 2005, and the worst of those, Katrina. Katrina, the most costliest storm of all time, with an estimated $125 billion worth of losses. It happened over the course of 8 days in late August, and the 175-mile-per-hour winds pounded down on a levee system that was set to protect the city of New Orleans. The levee broke at over 50 points and resulted in over 1,800 losses of life. If you are a quarter of the Americans that live in or around the coastal region, or you know someone who lives in or around the coastal region, or you're in an area where you may be susceptible to storms, even if they're not hurricanes, you have to listen to this podcast. It's life or death. So let's get started. Hey guys, it's Joe here from the Practical Prepper Podcast, and today we're here to talk about hurricanes. We're talking about the most destructive and life-claiming events that are going to happen in the United States this year. So the average hurricane will cost about $21.6 billion for the damages that are there, and it will claim hundreds of lives to thousands of lives. If you are of the 26 million Americans that may be affected this year, this is definitely the podcast for you. Even if you are of the 1/4 of the United States population that is located on the coastline or near the coastline in what we call the hurricane area, this is a must listen to. So I'm glad to have you here today, glad to help you. I've put a lot of thought and attention into this, and I want to make sure that you understand how to comprehend what is being said on the newscast, how to build your plan, how to practice that plan, and if so, how to evacuate, and if needed, how to shelter in place. Those are the things we want to make sure that we cover today. Before we get into those, just a quick word from our sponsor. Our show today is sponsored by Valley Food Storage. Valley Food Storage is the freeze-dried food supply, a clean and natural food supply that I keep in my home. I keep it and I feed it to my kids because it is the kind of label that my kids can read every ingredient on. And I've tried a few different ones and they've struggled with a few of them. And so that's the one that I keep in my house. In working with them and their sponsorship today, there's a code. You can go to their website at valleyfoodstorage.com and you can punch in the code at checkout NSRI20. Yes, that's for the podcast, the program that puts on the podcast here, the National Self-Reliance Initiative, and it's a 20% discount on every order you have over $100. So check that out. While you're at it, I'll put a lot of notes in the show notes today on our website at the National Self-Reliance Initiative.com. If you look at the blog, you'll see today's podcast, and you'll see the show notes that are in there, which will include the code that's in there for you, along with some of the notes and some of the checklists that I'll talk about today. While you're there, make sure you subscribe to the podcast here, wherever you subscribe to podcasts. If you go on to NSRI, our email, you can stay current on our daily emails that we send out on various topics of practical prepping. And as always, check us out on Facebook. It's the best place to stay in touch and to communicate with any of the topics that we're talking about here on the podcast as well. With all that, let's get into it. And I think the first place to start is really about an understanding of what the weatherman's talking about when they're talking on the television. And so let me give you a little bit of background on where they get the language that they use. Some of this stuff may be pretty common to you, but it wasn't all to me. So I wanted to make sure that we clear it up for anybody that hasn't been as familiar with some of this. But let's start with some of the simple things. Hurricane season. Hurricane season in the Atlantic, which is where most of the hurricanes come from in the United States, is from June 1st to November 30th. So that is when we're going to see hurricane action starting, and we'll talk about the different types of hurricanes here. In the Pacific, you get 2 extra weeks. Congratulations. And that starts really mid-May, and then goes through until the end of November in a very similar pattern. So we're going to see Category 3 hurricanes. We'll talk about that in a second. Category 3 hurricanes don't really start until after Labor Day, because there's the amount of heat that is needed in the water in order for those type of storms to develop. And then peak season for hurricanes is September 10th. If you took all the hurricanes, and they did, the service that monitors hurricanes, took all of the hurricanes in the last 120 years, compiled them all up on what days they hit landfall, and they all end up really peaking on September 10th. That makes us very timely in this podcast as we are here entering September here this week. some other fun facts about hurricanes, and this kind of factors into why they look like they do on the screen when you watch television and you're watching these things head your direction. First, in the Northern Hemisphere, where we're really focused our conversation today, and I know there's some of you that listen in Australia, India, and otherwise, but for the most part, just kind of take what I'm talking about here and you can extrapolate that into your home territory. Really, we're talking about hurricanes that rotate counterclockwise. So there is an effect, the Coriolis effect, that happens on vortexes. That gets really scientific in physics-y, but whether you're talking about a hurricane, a cyclone, or your toilet, things like to spin counterclockwise north of the equator, and that's why we're going to see when they're spinning, they're going to spin in that direction. There's some other things that kind of taper into that, but for just an understanding of, they spin counterclockwise. There are 4 types of hurricanes, or what we'll call tropical cyclones is the more general category, and those include the first level, which is tropical depressions. Tropical depressions are these tropical cyclones that are spinning at less than 38 miles per hour. These we'll see as numbered storms. Right now we've got a tropical depression 6 that's out in the Atlantic. Probably will do nothing, will never make landfall, probably will never become a hurricane, but we're tracking it just to kind of see where it heads. The next level they upgrade to is a tropical storm. So tropical depression, move to tropical storm once I cross that line of 39 miles per hour of sustained wind. These tropical storms are the ones that we start to name. Those named storms then potentially can become hurricanes. So that's the next level. You become a hurricane at 74 mile an hour of sustained winds, and then you can even hit up to, once you cross over that 111 mile mark, you can become a major hurricane. So our hurricanes are category 1 and 2. Our major hurricanes are categories 3, 4, and 5. So we talk about categories. There's a system, the Saffir-Simpson hurricane wind scale, that really categorizes based upon the sustained wind speed how large a hurricane is. And that's its propensity to deal damage and its propensity to take life. Those are the things that we're really looking at. So when we're talking about category 1 and 2, those are ones where many people might say, I might just weather that hurricane out. I might shelter in place. When we get to categories 3, 4, and 5, these are ones where there's going to be evacuation plans in place and or mandatory evacuations in order to preserve life. So those are the ones that you're going to have to start to think about in your plan, and exactly which category on the scale do I need to start moving. All right, so language of how we describe and how we classify hurricanes versus typhoons and cyclones. Is there a difference? There's really no difference. The difference is really geography. So if I have a hurricane, if a storm is originating in the Atlantic, if it's originating in the Caribbean, the Gulf of Mexico, those we're going to call hurricanes. Those are the ones that deal the most damage here in the United States. Why? We'll talk about that in a second. Typhoons are in the North Pacific. If you're in Hawaii, this is the one you're really concerned about. This is the one that's going to hit you over there, and we saw this happen even last year. Cyclones are in the South Pacific or Indian Ocean. These are the ones that mostly affect South Asia, India, and any of Oceania out there. That's what we're going to see a lot of those in that area that are going to hit. So the next piece we need to know about is the directionality of storms. So when we see a storm, we're going to see a storm, at least we're going to see it in the north of the equator. North of the equator, there are trade winds that follow the equator that move from east to west. And so we're going to see storms that are 5 degrees in north latitude, going to start to move from east towards the west, pushing those storms inward. And that's why we don't see a lot of storms. I don't see a lot of these tropical storms, tropical cyclones moving into California, because they're being pushed away from California. They're being pushed into Hawaii. They're being pushed into Florida and the surrounding states. So that's the directionality of it. Because of that Coriolis effect, we're going to see that the storms, which this Coriolis effect is basically meaning as you get away from the center of the earth, things start to fall towards the poles. So as the storm moves further away from the equator, the storm is going to start to curve north. It's going to probably make landfall in a northeastern means, and eventually it will actually spin out true north and at times even reverse effects. So once you get past the trade winds, it really, the trade winds moving east to west, we were like, man, that doesn't make any sense. The storm's by me, move west to east. Well, those are due to the jet stream. So once the storm moves past the trade winds, Coriolis effect spins it off, it gets caught in the jet stream and then pushes. We might actually see some of these storms head towards Great Britain eventually, and they might get some of that overall landfall. And we think about the overall kind of tropical stream that heads that direction, and it is the reason why London is known for their fog, because they get those warm waters kind of folding back in to what is otherwise a pretty mild, temperate climate. So hopefully that explains a little bit about how storms are moved around the earth and why Florida do they want you. South Carolina is the other one that we'll talk about. Those are the two most hit areas, and very obvious reasons, right? Florida's huge, first of all. It's one of our largest states, and it's a peninsula. It sticks way the heck out there in the water. So it is apt for these type of storms to come through. It is the southernmost state. I hear you, Texas. You went to mainland, but it is the southernmost state, closest to the Atlantic. That's why it gets hit. Now, South Carolina is the second most hit, and the reason for that is it protrudes out. You go ahead and look, Georgia kind of tucks itself back in there a little bit as storms start to head up northwest and then due north, but South Carolina's protruding out there, and you're going to catch the storm, and you've got a front for making landfall there, in many ways protecting North Carolina from the initial landfall piece. All those are just some stats to understand why things are happening and why the weatherman is talking about what they're talking about. I'll talk a little bit about frequency of the storms too, just as an understanding of how often these things are come. We're going to get about 9 tropical storms on average per year. Some years are much bigger than others. 2005 was the biggest year we've had. We've been a few years past that. Hurricanes, 5.4, and then our major hurricanes, 1.9. So we're going to get almost 2 on average of those major devastating hurricanes that we're going to see a year. So we plan on those, and we have seen upwards of 5-6 of those a year. But on average, we've had some years with none, actually. So we never know which way that it's going to go. It is nature, and nature bends however nature feels. So we know there's named storms. We talk about those being the tropical storms, hurricanes, and major hurricanes that we just kind of broke out into a few categories. Well, named storms, how do we name a storm? Can I get a storm named after me? It's unlikely the storm will be named directly after you unless you are a member of the World Meteorological Organization and you attend the convention where they set the names for every 6 years. They have a conference every year. Names are set for 6 years in advance. You can head on their website right now and check out all the named storms. There's no surprises. They don't name them as they come. So we know through 2024 what the name of every storm will be. Those are all set in stone. There will be no changes for the next 6 years. What will happen is that big storms might come through. So we're going to see some major devastating storms, and in order not to reuse those names, because those are kind of now thought in a moment in time as specific storms, they'll retire those names. So they're going to get together at what I assume is a really cool and fun meeting there at the WMO convention, and they're going to debate on which names get retired each year. So last year we retired Florence and Michael. The year before that we retired Harvey, Irma, Maria, and Nate. Those are all gone. You're never going to see those again. The other thing that note is they are alphabetical. So the first storm of the year is going to begin with an A, then a B, then a C, then a D. You're going to see that go all the way through, and it's going to alternate by gender. So this year we've got Abigail, and we go through, and next year it will start with a guy name, and just to be fair and equal. Things were not always equal. Equality in the meteorological sense has not always been there. In fact, in World War II, the Navy and the Army used primarily only female names and left the guys out of the whole storm thing. And eventually, in 1979, equality was reestablished, and the men were allowed to have storms named after them as well. Prior to that, prior to the idea of naming storms after women, which happened, like we said, mostly was military. They were trying to track the movement and how it would impact troops. They were normally named prior to that after the feast day that they made landfall. So we might see like San Felipe in 1825 as a storm that comes through as a name of a storm that comes. So if you're looking historically at what are the storms that have happened in your area, these major hurricanes that have come through, and you see them named San Felipe and things like that, that's the reason why they're going to carry those kind of names. All right, so hopefully that helps out with the naming. Why are they going boy, girl? Why are there so many that are there? A couple, if we run out, what happens if we run out of letters? Well, first of all, we don't use all the letters. They don't use Q, U, X, Y, or Z. So there's a fun fact if you're ever on Jeopardy and you get that one. I don't know why. There's probably not, in a global sense, those aren't letters that are used as well. I wish I could find some facts on that. Write me if you figure that one out. But if there's more than 21, we switch over to Greek letters, alpha, beta, gamma. We go through those pieces. And as we mentioned before, the tropical depressions are numbered and not named. Once they hit their speed of that 38 miles an hour, then we'll tag them with a name, and we'll go from there. So the next thing I want to talk to you about are the 6 things you need to do for hurricane season. These are things, quite honestly, should have been done already. If I'm telling you this list and there's anything on here that you haven't done already, I really encourage you to go do them today. Most of them are very easy to do, but they're all necessary. So let me run through them. Let me start with the first one, which is understand your risk. This is kind of twofold. It's understanding your risk that a hurricane is going to happen to you, and it's understanding your risk from a liability standpoint, meaning is your insurance covering any of this stuff? And there are 3 real categories that I want to talk about. The first one's inland rain. So as rain begins to downfall from the hurricane, you're going to see flooding happen. This water wants to escape back out to the ocean where it came from. Inland flooding is going to create streams to swell. So if you're near an inland stream, even if you weren't near where the hurricane made landfall, this can still be a problem for you. So you really need to consider, does your insurance policy cover flood insurance? Because this isn't really a hurricane. This is really a flood that's happening due to rains that are happening maybe even uphill up in the mountains that are coming back your way. So think about the inland flooding. Think about your propensity for risk based upon how close you are to streams, onto low areas, and the ability for water to move through and to get out. The next one to think about is wind. Wind is the number one thing that is going to damage your property. It is going to rip off roofs. When it gets up as high as 190 miles an hour, it's going to flip boats. It's going to move cars into ditches. There's a lot of destruction that's going to happen. So understanding how much wind can your home take before it's torn apart, before it's ripped off like a can opener, and before you're now exposed to the hurricane directly. This is extremely serious. If you're thinking about sheltering in place in a Category 5 storm, you better know for sure that you are not going to be susceptible to flooding, and that the winds that are going to hit, that your home is built to tolerate this. Your storm shades are built to tolerate this. There's a ton of debris flying around in these sort of storms. We're going to see telephone poles tossed around like toothpicks, and those things are going to come right through homes. This is an extremely dangerous situation. Like I said, it's the number one most costly issue that pertains to the storm, the most destructive area that's there. The next one's the storm surge. Storm surge means a lot of water is going to come in, but a lot of water is going to come in a way that you don't necessarily understand. I'm going to take 2 seconds to get a little physics on you here, but the storm itself is very heavy. It's putting downward pressure. It's holding all this rain, all this moisture, and all this wind. As it pushes down, much like we would think about pushing an upside-down cup into a pot of water, the rest of the water rises around the outside of it. That's cool for the ocean because the ocean can take it. But on the land side, there's nowhere else for it to go, so it pushes up the land. At the same point in time, we have a less pressure pushing down on the land because there's a low pressure front that is pulling the storm along as well. Well, that low pressure is now not forcing down on the storm as hard, which allows it to rise up as well. So you have both those things are working in concert together to make a higher level of water near the shore. The third thing that's happening is you've got sustained winds of 100 mile an hour plus that are pushing and pushing and pushing water in. It doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about the leaves in your backyard, if you're from the Midwest like I am, these leaves are piling up in a pile in a certain spot in your yard because the wind is continuing to push and push and push them there, and they have nowhere else to go because there's land on the other side of them, or a tree on the other side of them, or something else. That restriction of being able to move is going to raise the overall level of the water could be 15, could be up to 25 feet. The most devastating storm surge in the history of the United States is in Galveston, Texas, and it killed almost 12,000 people is what they're estimating. That's a huge loss of life, all pertaining to a flood. In Katrina, what really caused the most damage in that case, which is the most expensive hurricane ever in the history of the United States, what really happened there was the storm surge came in and it degraded the levees in over 50 places. We saw those things fail out. And that's why they had the devastation that they had there. Because not only was there a 25-foot storm surge, but now I have lakes that are now emptying out into the ocean past levees into cities. And I've got immense flooding. So this is really the one that I'm most concerned about is the storm surge. Understand your elevation. Understand what the potential is that storm surge is going to affect you. Take care of those three things and then begin to build your plan. That's the second thing I need you to think about. Know your plan. So how are you going to decide to stay or go? At what level will you decide, oh, it's a category 2, we're staying. It's category 3. What will you do if there's a mandatory evacuation? When you leave, where are you going to go? That's really the biggest one for me is make sure you understand where to go. And here's my best advice to you. My best advice to you is if you need to go, quit treating it like an evacuation. Think of it like a vacation. So, for instance, my family that I have in Georgia, if a hurricane is coming their way, they're going to come up and visit us in Ohio and spend a couple days, and we're going to hang out. And we might go to Cedar Point and do some fun stuff, and it's not going to affect anybody. It's just an unplanned vacation for all of us, but it's the best way to get past the storm. It's the best way not to think about it. It's the best way to stay safe. So think of it more as an unplanned vacation if you can. Prepare for that. Have a little cash set aside as an emergency fund. Have supplies that you need in order to get to where you need to go. Know where you're going and know the routes that get there. One of the biggest problems that you're going to find when you begin to get on the road is you're going to hit a lot of traffic. You're going to hit potential passageways where the water is rising in a river or they've closed the road. Or somebody broke down and now that road's blocked, or they've closed the highway. All these things are things you're going to run into. So understanding the best way to get where you're going, but then understanding the alternate routes to get there and where those blocks might be so you kind of know where those pivots are. Those are all important pieces to kind of build in your plan. All right, so number 3. Number 3 is be ready to go. So don't be the last one out. Why don't be the last one out? Well, the last one out is going to deal with troubles around finding fuel, definitely around finding food places are going to start to run out, those little stops on the side of the road where you're going to check into those travel centers and whatnot. Hotels are going to fill up. People didn't have a plan, didn't know how to get there. So now you need to sleep in your car because your hotels are filled up. And the big thing to know about being ready to go is I always make sure you want to take cash out. As soon as you hear there might be a hurricane coming your way, get some cash out of the bank if you don't keep it on hand in your home. Make sure you have it with you because you're going to get to some of these places that have gas, but internet service is down, and so they can't check your credit card, or they just want to deal in cash because they're being shisty, and they just don't want to pay credit card companies their 3%, so they just want to deal in cash, and so they're going to rake everybody over the coals. You have to be ready for those kind of people. You have to be ready for those kind of situations. So make sure you have that cash on hand as well. That's going to be important to making sure your trip's there. All right, so you know how to go, you know where you're going, you've got a plan, all that's all great. Now you need to batten the home down. So battening your home or closing your home up and preparing it to leave is an important piece. First of all, remember supplies are going to run out. So if you need plywood, you got to get it early. It doesn't hurt to buy plywood. If you go to Home Depot, you can buy plywood, take it home, keep it in your garage. If the storm doesn't come, you just go take it back. They give you your money back. If you wait until the day before the storm makes landfall, there'll be no plywood. I guarantee it. So it doesn't hurt to go get it. I'm not saying hoard it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying prepare yourself, be prepared, and be self-reliant. Be ready to go, hang that, guard your windows. We're really talking about the wind that is going to blow debris and rocks and sticks and stuff like that towards your house. Protect, harden it up, defend it. And the other one is reinforced doors. In my house, I've replaced all of the hinge screws with like 3-inch screws to get really through the jam and into the studs. And same for all the locks and the plates. Make sure you've done that. You don't want a door to kick open in the middle of a storm and Now the storm is just breathing into your house, all kinds of debris and stuff like that. So make sure you've hardened your exteriors, you've protected any of the glass and the doors and whatnot, and you're good to go there. Number 5, help other people if you can, right? If you got the extra time, remember, not everyone has a truck to go get the plywood. If you have a truck and you're going to get plywood, just ask your neighbor, do you want to come with me to go get some plywood for you? That's super helpful. Remember, when we get back from the storm being over, we're going to need each other in order to get by for a little while. That little bit of friendship up front is part of what being a neighbor is, right? We live in a neighborhood. Let's be neighborly. If the lady next door can't lift a sheet of plywood, maybe lift it up and shoot a couple screws in for her. If the guy next door can't get to the store and he's planning on weathering the storm, maybe we just ask him if he wants to go with us to the grocery store, or can I pick you up some extra stuff? Help out. Be neighborly. Be what we think of as, not everyone can be self-reliant because of their physical nature, because of their age, because of whatever it is. It's not their fault always. So if you have the opportunity to help someone be self-reliant, help make their life a little easier, just take it. Take that chance. The last one, number 6, is practice the plan. We can talk all we want, but if we don't try it, it just won't work. When we think about, it's preseason football right now. I don't know if you guys are football fans or not, but preseason football, they just didn't start playing football. They did training camp, right? Built a plan, built a playbook, practiced it, then did actual trials against other opponents to see how it worked before we start playing real games. To just show up and start playing, there's spring training for baseball, right? We don't just, let's just start the baseball season and see if everybody can still throw or not. No, it doesn't make any sense. If you're an actor on Broadway, you don't just memorize the lines and show up on stage and let's see if the lights work. Let's see if the camera works, or see if the vocals work. Let's see if all that happens. No, we do a full dress rehearsal. We do dress rehearsals. We do internal shows. We do all those kind of things in order to make sure that it's going to go well when that happens. It doesn't matter what you do. Nobody builds a plan and doesn't practice it if they actually want it to work. And there is no higher stakes opportunity where you can't afford failure than if a hurricane is going to bear down on you. So here's my advice. My advice would be get ready to bug out and then practice it, right? Like just go figure out, hey, we're going to take a weekend and we're going to go do something fun, but we're going to mask it as hey, it's our fun hurricane weekend and we're a hurricane-free weekend and we're just going to load everybody up in the car. We're going to go somewhere for an overnight. And we're just going to practice it. In my house, we do a night over at Great Wolf Lodge. The kids go have fun. It's a blast. And it's super easy and it's fun for everybody. And did we get all the supplies in the car? Did it all work? Were we able to get out of town? Maybe we take an alternate route this time than last time because it's on our way to where we're going. So pick something on the way to where you're going to go. Test out a couple routes. Do it once a year. Practice it out. And just, be safe. That's really the key here is we want to make sure everybody is being super safe. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is an evacuation kit. So we're getting ready to go. We talked about we have to practice, but what goes in the car when we need to get out? So what is it going to be like bugging out in a hurricane situation? If you're not in the first wave of people that did it and are going to go take a nice vacation for yourself, unexpected vacation, then you're going to be in the middle or towards the end of those people that are leaving. You're going to find a lot of windshield time. There's going to be a lot of time to sit there and hold that steering wheel. There's going to be traffic. People are going to be backed up, especially the closer to the coast you are, the harder it is to get out. There's going to be a lack of available fuel, food, water. These are things that are just not going to be on the path as they might have been if this was a different time of year. There's going to be a lack of hotel space. If you're not ready to sleep in your car, you're probably going to be disappointed unless you really got out of Dodge early. And if you don't have a plan on where you're going, then you're probably going to get a nice free stay in one of those FEMA shelters. The government's there to help, right? What could go wrong? So that's kind of what goes through my head when I'm thinking about, all right, I need to put a kit together. So here's the things that I need to make sure that I have in my kit. I'm going to run it down. I got 15 things here for you. First one's fuel. I'm taking my truck. That's typically how I'm going to go. If you're taking an SUV, you may not want fuel in the car. Maybe you can put some fuel on the car. You can put a little attachment on the back of your car to bring some fuel along. It's a just-in-case piece, right? I know my tank can get me to a gas station. I'm going to try not to use it. I'm going to try to go to the gas station. But if I'm on the highway and an accident happens and I'm there for 8 hours, which has happened before, and now I run out of fuel because I was trying to get to that next stop, I now have fuel. My car is not stranded. My family's not stranded, and I'm able to move forward. And that's a very relieving feeling. Cash. We talked about there could be shiesty people who are going to only take cash now on the route. There are places where credit card machines are going to go down. And I guarantee you on the way back, when you're headed back, there'll be a lot of places that are going to be cash only. If you're going back to a place of pure devastation, it is going to be a cash economy. So you want to make sure you have that. The ATMs may not be there when you get back. So whether I would always grab cash on the way out, I would try to restock that cash on the way back. Water. So to bring some water. You know about how much. We try to bring a gallon a day per person. Try to bring enough fresh water that you don't need to rely on the stores along the way for replenishments. Now, all that being said, stop and get bottles of water as long as they have it. But if they don't have it, you're not in trouble, right? So you got a gas container on the back of your car now to keep an extra couple gallons of gas just to get you out of there. Maybe strap one of those nice, clean, potable ones full of water as well, too. Now you're covered on those fronts. Food, I gave a little shout out to our sponsor earlier in this, to Valley Food Storage, but that's my plan. My plan is they have some things that are easy. I can eat out of the bag that don't need heated. There are some things that I want to bring that I'm going to bring my little stove and I'm going to heat up because I'm going to want a warm meal even if I'm in a parking lot that night, right? Plus, the people who I'm going to go visit aren't expecting me necessarily. I probably just called them and said, hey, by the way, we're coming to visit. So showing up with a couple meals along the way is probably just a nice thing to do as an unexpected guest. Even if you don't need it, it's nice to bring along with you. Plus, remember, when you come back, there may not be a grocery store. So having that food available to you when you come back, the rest of your food that you leave behind may be gone. If you're a prepared person like me and you've got a couple months worth of food on hand, what you don't bring with you may not be there when you get back. Don't rely on it. Assume what you took is what you're bringing back with you. So food's important. Radio, I prefer a hand crank radio that also takes batteries. Batteries are great. I don't like to sit there and crank a radio, but if it runs out, I also don't want to know what's going on. My personal preference is one that has a weather band on it, but also make sure I can get AM on there as well too, which is where most of my news is going to come from, and it's just a longer reach band. So I want to make sure I'm able to get that as well. Bedding. If you end up in a shelter, you are probably going to want to sleep on your own stuff. If you end up in your car, you're probably going to want to sleep on your own stuff. I can be honest with you. When hotels start to run dry, you're going to end up in motels that you never would have stayed of otherwise. I was a truck driver for a while. I've stayed in some pretty shady motels. Having your own bedding is still something I did even then. Even then when I showed up, I just didn't want to risk it. So may want to bring some bedding. Clothing, we think about clothing that's appropriate for where you are. If you're caught in the storm, if you need to change a tire, clothing that's appropriate for where you're going. So if you are in October and you're leaving Florida to head to New York, it's cold. It's going to be chilly. You're going to need a coat, things like that. And then think about, what do I need when I get back? So clothing. Did I bring boots? Did I bring up a set of gloves? What did I bring with me so that when I come back, I have the appropriate clothing as well too? I may have left in shorts, but I may want a pair of jeans when I'm sifting back through what's left in my house. First aid is another one. You're going to need to make sure you have enough first aid stuff to take care of yourself. These medical services are going to be really pushed to the brinks, right? You're going to need to make sure that you're able to take care of most first response stuff on your own. Band-Aids, splints, things like that, you should just keep. So whatever your medical go bag is, if you have a home go bag that you bring to soccer games and whatnot, which is what I do. I have a truck bag that I take to my kids' stuff just in case somebody gets hurt. Be prepared, right? Be ready for anything that you can take care of on your own, because it may take forever for services to get to you, especially if you're in a traffic situation. You may be waiting a while for even an ambulance to get to you. Any specialty items? Specialty items I think of like diapers and wipes, anything that's age appropriate, age specific, or need specific. So I would lump medications in here too. If you're a diabetic, bring your insulin. If you've got a baby, diapers and wipes, right? If you have daily medications, bring enough to be gone for a while. Maybe bring all of it. Maybe assume it's not going to be there when you get back. And the stores, when you get back, aren't going to be able to refill those prescriptions. So you may need to make sure you have enough of everything that you really want. Toiletries, the things you need to feel human, your toothbrush, toothpaste, soaps, things like that. You may end up on the road for a day or two. You may end up, as I have before, stopping in a nice truck stop and borrowing a shower. And yes, they'll have some things there, but it's not your stuff. So continue to be you and bring the stuff that you need to feel whole. Flashlights and batteries. Make sure you have a couple flashlights. Sometimes you need it when you get back, and it becomes dark when you're coming back, and you wish you would have kept a flashlight out of the hurricane, so that you can still see where things are and continue to find your things. So keep a flashlight with batteries. It's always great, whether it's changing a tire or just finding something in your bag at night. It's going to be very, very helpful. Keys. I am bad at this. I keep an extra house key in my truck. Why? Because I use my garage door opener to get into my house, and I sometimes, if I've had power outages before where then I'm like, man, how do I get into my own house now? Because the garage door opener doesn't work. So I have learned, like many of us, to put a key inside your car, your truck, but don't forget them. Don't forget keys to your house. Don't forget keys to your safe. If you have a safety deposit box, if you have anything like that where there are keys, bring all your keys. You don't want to come back and have to search through things for keys. So if you have a key, bring it. Cell phone and charger. I assumed you guys breathe cell phones and chargers, but just in case, I threw that one in there. If you're anything like me, that's just a different appendage that you carry everywhere, and it's a good one to have. Take some pictures of stuff before you leave. Make sure you do that with the cell phone. Bring those pictures with you on the cell phone. It will help later when you're dealing with claims. I would just take a video of my entire house. I just walk through the whole thing, videotape everything, and make sure that I have that all down. All right, 2 more left. Pet care. I've got pets. I think you guys might have pets. So pets, make sure you have enough water for your pets too. Make sure you've got dog food or cat food or whatever kind of pet you happen to have. A collar and a leash, ID, their vaccinations, cage, and any medicines. Why did I list those last few things? All right. If you get to a pet-friendly shelter, or there are a couple pet-friendly shelters. There's not a lot of FEMA ones, but there are pet-friendly hotels and pet-friendly shelters. Pet-friendly shelters will not let you in unless your dog is vaccinated, has an ID, has a leash, and a kennel. So if you didn't bring any of those things, you now are sleeping in your car with your dog. So I encourage you to bring those things just in case. It doesn't hurt to have them. Fold the cage down, throw it on top of your car, grab the medicine, vaccination records, IDs, and all that stuff, and bring it with you. My dogs don't always wear a leash. I live in a couple acres. They wander. I don't always have a collar on them. So it would be a thought process for me to remember, go grab that collar, make sure you have the leash, make sure you have their bowls, make sure you have their food, but run through that in your head. Make sure you have an emergency kit for your pets. Take care of them too. Last one is toys and books. Okay, probably not the most important, but when you're killing time, if you ended up in a FEMA shelter, or even if you're just at a friend's house, a deck of cards will go a long way. Books for kids in the cars will keep them sane and you sane. So think through what your family is going to need to be able to kill the time while you're waiting to go back. Walk through those. If you're not treating it like a vacation and you're just trying to escape, you're going to need something to do while you're there. So find those things, bring those things with you, and hopefully that helps. All right, last things you need really are the list of documents. This is kind of a separate list of things, but I wanted to walk you through what not to forget. So here's what you need to pack up before you leave for a hurricane. Get a waterproof container. If for some reason you're carrying a lot of documents here, you don't want these things to be damaged, grab a 5-gallon sealable bucket. If you have nothing else, grab a Ziploc bag, any kind of dry bag you have. Put all these documents in there. Bring insurance papers. You know you bought insurance. You know insurance is going to cover a lot of any of the damages when you get back, but having a copy of that insurance will help expedite the process. It's going to have all of your numbers on there, allowances and all those things. It's going to help you to understand, do you have extra money now to go buy replacement clothes? Are you able to go and get a hotel room, and is it covered? Things like that. So take that stuff with you. Medical records, any medical records that, remember, hospitals might be wiped out. Most things are on electronic medical records today on major systems, so it's less of a concern. But just in case, I would bring any medical records that you have. Bank account numbers. If you bank like me, you bank with a card that you go and swipe in an ATM and get cash out. Everything else is auto-deposited and auto-deducted. If you're not like me, then you want to make sure you bring like checkbooks and things like that. But if you are like me, go get your account number. There is a good possibility that you're going to need to go to the bank and physically take out cash out of the teller. And if you haven't done that in a while, if you don't know your account numbers, sometimes it can be cumbersome. Social security cards, any kind of IDs, passports, documentations, things that you need that are unique records of you that you don't want destroyed or are very, very difficult to replace. Birth certificates, items like that, any of those personally identifiable documents that you have stashed up. Deeds and mortgages, you want to make sure that if you have a deed to anything, property, whether it be your primary property or other, that you've got all that information as well. Mortgages, the mortgage will still expect you to pay it even if there is a hurricane. So make sure you know how to do that while you're gone. Don't miss your bills, any bills you have. It's not a bad idea to grab a stack of bills from the last month and bring them with you, because they're still going to want you to pay even though your life is upside down right now. And don't ruin your credit score because a storm came. Figure out how to keep all that stuff on the up and up. Marriage certificates. What else we got? Any other stock certificates? So if you've bought physical stock or bonds and you want to make sure you bring those. The last year's tax returns, at least. A lot of times when you're filing a tax return, you need information from the previous year's tax return to file electronically. You want to make sure you have at least 1 year's tax return or you're not going to be able to do that. And the last one for me is really wills, any wills or trusts that you have set up for you or your family. Make sure you bring all that stuff with you. All right, so as we close it out today, I hope this was really helpful. I wanted to make sure you knew how to listen to what the weather advisory services are telling you, what that weatherman or weatherwoman is telling you. Make sure you can interpret that appropriately. Understand the 6 important things that you should be planning to make sure that you're able to think appropriately when the storms come. And also, what are you taking with you? What are the list of items that you need, the documents you need, and how to close down that house? Hopefully that's everything. I've given you a little bit of knowledge here that's going to help you be a little more prepared. If you have any more questions, please always reach out to me on Facebook at NSRI USA. I'm on there. Just look for Joe. And I'm posting often, so you can go ahead and reach out to me, give me some feedback, or just post your list on there. If you've got a go bag or anything, pictures are worth 1,000 words. It's great to share these things amongst the community, and thanks so much, and thanks again to our sponsor. And please, if you don't mind, go and subscribe. We really love to have you subscribing and listening each week. I know you're here this week because of hurricanes, but we put out some great stuff every week. From all of us at the Practical Prepper Podcast and at the National Self-Reliance Initiative, we hope you're safe out there this hurricane season. Take care.